80 people were killed in Syria today, and the regime bombs Homs and commits yet another massacre in Al-Khalidiyya. Clinton in Turkey talks about the post-Assad period, and Al-Akhdar al-Ibrahimi is considering to succeed former envoy Kofi Annan. And also in the news, 150,000 Syrian refugees are recorded with the UNHCR, and 54,000 are in Turkey. Welcome to Orient TV English News Bulletin. The local coordinating committee said that the number of victims fell in Syria today are more than 80, and they increased mostly in Dar'a and Aleppo. Meanwhile, the neighborhoods of As-Safsafa, Bab Houd, Bab Dreb, Al-Hamidiyya, Jurat al-Shiyah were heavily rocked by mortars and artillery shelling. Also, dozens of victims fell dead and wounded by the shelling on Al-Khalidiyya neighborhood, where several buildings were destroyed. And to that, the neighborhoods of Dirb Alba and Shammas witnessed firing from heavy shells and bullets amid residents' fears from a new massacre.
A new massacre was committed by the regime forces in Al-Khalidiyya neighborhood in Homs, where the regime's military aviation bombed a building consisting of 5 floors, which led to its collapse on the heads of its dwellers. And for the second consecutive day, the shelling continues, where 20 victims fell dead and wounded. And there are no accurate figures yet due to the collapse of a whole building and the lack of machinery and equipment necessary to remove the accumulated concrete blocks. The bombardment also targeted the neighborhoods of Jurat al-Shiyah, Al-Hamidiyya and Al-Qusur, and the old neighborhoods of Homs, where the regime forces used mortars and artillery, while members of the security forces and Shabiha attempted to storm the neighborhood of Al-Shammas amid heavy fire from heavy machine guns. The cities and towns in Homs countryside also witnessed heavy shelling, where the regime forces used new shells of high explosives, according to the testimony of the citizens in Al-Rastan, who confirmed that their destructive power is enormous. Meanwhile, the city of Talbisi was bombed with rockets, which led to the destruction of several houses, especially in the west and south neighborhoods, as well as the village of Al-Ghanto, which led to the fall of victims dead and wounded, including a child. And in the city of Homs, the shelling focused on the villages of Admini and Nazariya and Jusiye. Also, the shelling targeted the border areas near the city of Al-Qasir and specifically the Lebanese village of Akroum.
In Aleppo, fighting continued between the regime forces and members of the Free Syrian Army for the 4th consecutive week. Meanwhile, bombardment was renewed on the neighborhood of Al-Firdos, Al-Qatirji, Bustan Al-Qasr, Al-Halak, amid intensive gunfire, and the Free Syrian Army confirmed its full control on the neighborhood of Al-Jandul Attal Bustan al-Basha, and that the Free Syrian Army are trying to control the neighborhood of Maysalun, which they described as its strategic link to the city of Aleppo. The capital, Damascus, helicopters bombed the neighborhoods of Al-Qadam, Jobar, Nahr Aisha, and Al-Asali amid violent clashes between the regime's army and the Free Syrian Army near Zubair Mosque and the Shuhada Street in Al-Tadaman neighborhood, also in Victoria Bridge. Meanwhile, heavy shooting was heard in most neighborhoods of Jobar and Al-Qaboon. To that, the Syrian Human Rights Network documented the death of 108 civilians yesterday, mostly in Aleppo and Damascus and their countrysides. Meanwhile, there were news about the fall of many dead and wounded civilians after the fall of dozens of missiles on the city of Hamuriya in Damascus suburbs, which led to the destruction of many houses. And the search for victims under the rubble continued. Also, shelling was renewed on the cities of Zabadani and Qudsaya, coinciding with heavy fire. Meanwhile, helicopters were seen flying over the city of Al-Tal amid violent artillery bombardment. In Idlib, military operations continued in the province and its surroundings, where several victims fell wounded in Al-Najia after the continued bombing. Meanwhile, activists reported the presence of a large number of troops in the main streets, with snipers present on rooftops in search of dissident soldiers, while the Free Syrian Army was able to destroy all military checkpoints around the city of Kafr Nabil, Ariha, Al-Bara, which are being exposed to heavy artillery shelling. Also in Idlib suburbs, morning demonstrations swept at Tauba and Mountain Shahshabo, during which protesters called for freedom and the overthrow of the regime. And we go back to the situation in Homs, and we speak to media activist and from the Homs Media Center, Sami Arifai, who will tell us more about the situation there. Sami, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Yara.
Sami, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Good evening to you. Can you tell us more, and can you shed some light on the situation in Homs today?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I would like to say that although the death toll in Homs has significantly decreased over the past 2 weeks due to the fights in Aleppo and Damascus, that doesn't mean that violence and shelling and killing have stopped. We're still being shelled, and Homs is still under siege. And, but now instead of having like over 30 martyrs a day, we have about 10 martyrs a day. About 10 isn't simply a figure. We're talking about innocent civilians who are dying while they're sleeping or eating, and sometimes while they're being treated. Now, there was a massacre yesterday committed against the whole Christian family in the village of Ismail al-Sharqiyya, where the regime helicopter gunship shelled the village, and that led to 8 people getting martyred from the same family, from the Zouk family. Now, up to this moment, 10 civilians have been martyred, 2 children and 1 woman. In the city of Al-Qusayr, there was a shell that fell on one of the houses, and that led to the death of the son, wife, and daughter of one of the nurses of the makeshift hospital. And we have reason to believe that it was target shelling, not random shelling. Now, as for the humanitarian situation, it is deteriorating every single day. Simple wounds are leading to amputations because there is barely any medical aid. Food is very scarce here, and if there is any food, then it's not enough. Yes, Yara.
Sami, can you tell us more regarding the situation in terms of where is the bombing and the attacks concentrated? We're talking generally about Homs. Can you tell us why would some areas be concentrated in regards of the attacks more than other areas?
Well, it depends on the strongholds of the Free Syrian Army. Sometimes when there is movement, when there are movements by the Free Syrian Army, then there is very concentrated strikes on those areas. Mm-hmm. But other times when there are demonstrations against the government, then there are also strikes and attacks and shelling on those areas. But generally, there isn't like one specific area. Every day they shell different area. So today there is, like for example, in a restaurant they shell it a lot. But tomorrow maybe it might say like Talbisa or Al-Qusayr. So there isn't really a pattern. It's just shelling,
Sami, thank you for speaking to us. That was Sami Rifai, Homs Media Center in Homs, telling us more about the situation there. Coming up later in the bulletin, the UN records 150,000 refugees who escaped from the regime's brutality. Welcome back. You're watching Orient TV English News Bulletin. The military and security campaigns continued on the province of Deir ez-Zor, where the government forces bombed residential homes heavily with their military planes, especially the town of Bulletin. This bombing led to killing at least 3 people and injured dozens of others, some of whom are in a critical condition. Furthermore, many houses were destroyed in the city of Al-Bukamal, while the regime forces hammered the neighborhood of Al-Katif with dozens of shells. Three people were killed. An explosive that was implanted by the regime forces in the village of Darabla in Hama, according to activists. Meanwhile, at least 5 rockets fell on the village of Atwini, while the town of Mardas witnessed heavy gunfire shooting that was coming from the regime's tanks that were positioned on a bridge. Moreover, a massive protest came out in Al-Latamina and Hama suburbs today in support of the Free Syrian Army. In the city of Al-Latamina, also in Hama suburbs, citizens took to the streets in morning protests that demanded the overthrow of the regime. Moving on to Latakia, where the artillery bombardment shook the town of Kansabba and its villages. Activists reported that 9 members of a family were killed in Salma due to the heavy bombing that targeted the town. Meanwhile, the village of Ghamam in Jabal al-Akrad witnessed massive bombardment in the past 24 hours, which led to destroying most of the village's buildings. In a broadcasted video, Turkmen rebels declared the formation of the Turkmen Mountain Brigade in Latakia to be a part of the Free Syrian Army brigades and working on the ground to overthrow the regime. 7 people were killed, including a pregnant woman, due to the heavy bombing that targeted the National Hospital in Tafas this dawn. Meanwhile, many were injured, mostly children, by the bombing that targeted Basra Sham, while the village of Masakin Jaldin witnessed a wide military deployment amid fears of arrest and robbing campaigns. Furthermore, activists reported that many people in the village of Tafas left their town, fearing that the regime will invade the town.
The Assad regime forces committed a new crime in Tafas National Hospital when they bombarded it using heavy artillery, and due to the bombardment, several victims fell dead and wounded. The regime forces also launched a raid on the city of Tafas from several directions using tanks and hundreds of soldiers, while the sounds of bullets did not stop with the siege on the city. From their side, the Free Syrian Army tried to defend the citizens that are being targeted by the regime's fire without discrimination. The town of Mahajji also witnessed the death of a woman and 13 fell wounded, including 4 children. This is not far from the bombardment of the regime forces on the town of Alma, which claimed the lives of several victims, including the displaced citizens from the town of Al-Hirak. And despite the bombardment, the citizens of Dir'a find the town of Al-Sheikh Miskin, where they can share the food and help those in need in other towns and neighboring districts, especially with the blockade and the lack of food and medicine. And on the other hand, rising voices from Enkhil condemn the world's silence towards what is happening to the people in Syria.
The town of Jabbat al-Khashab in the province of Qunaitara near the Golan Heights witnessed heavy shelling with artillery and mortar shells by regime forces stationed in the area surrounding the region, which led to the demolition of several houses and shops. The shelling also reached the town cemetery, which led to the destruction of several graves. Coming up in the bulletin, the UN records 150,000 refugees who escaped from the regime's brutality. U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said that 3 priorities need to be dealt with immediately, and they are supporting the opposition, stopping the violence, and starting the transitional stage. In a joint press conference with her Turkish counterpart in Istanbul, Clinton added that the Syrian regime's violence is escalating as the opposition gets stronger. And she also referred to the tragic stories conveyed by Syrian refugees about the brutality and violence in the regime. And she stressed the importance of starting the transitional stage, pointing out that the Syrian opposition is committed to a democratic Syria. Moreover, Hillary Clinton said that the United States and Turkey are considering the establishment of a no-fly zone and other steps to help the Syrian opposition forces. And at the news conference in Istanbul, Clinton said that her country will enhance coordination with Turkey on Syria, noting that the imposition of a no-fly zone could be an option. Clinton also added that the intelligence agencies and the military in both the United States and Turkey have important responsibilities, noting that it will form a working group for this matter.
Our 2 ministries are coordinating much of it, but our intelligence services, our military.
German intelligence chiefs said the government of Bashar al-Assad is in its last stage due to the fact that its army is losing many battles and many of its soldiers are defecting and are joining the opposition. Meanwhile, Gerard Schneider, the chairman of the Federal Intelligence Service, said that al-Assad's army, which used to consist of 320,000 soldiers, lost almost 50,000 since the uprising began. Schneider said in an interview with Die Welt newspaper that there are many signs that the game is ending for the Syrian regime. He explained that despite the overwhelming firepower of the Syrian government, the fighters of the Free Syrian Army are making up for it by using speed and maneuvers to strike quickly. As the bombing increases on the Syrian cities, especially Daraa, the number of refugees also increases. More about that we see in this report.
The temperature reaches over 40 degrees Celsius amid hardships that are increasing on the Syrian refugees, while the international community neglects the victims that are being killed in Syria. However, this did not stop the Syrian refugees in Al-Zaatari refugee camp in Jordan to continue what they started in Syria, despite their sufferings. The number of refugees are increasing as the bombing increases in Syria by the regime forces, whether it was in the south or the north, where the neighborhoods of Aleppo are witnessing a non-stop bombardment by the regime's forces, which led to increasing the number of refugees in Turkey to 54,000, according to its foreign ministry. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees said that the number of refugees that are recorded in nearby countries is close to 150,000 refugees. The Commissioner also said that the number of refugees that are coming from Aleppo and its surroundings to Turkey have increased, and many others have traveled to other countries such as Algeria, Egypt, Morocco, and the Greek region. The increasing number of refugees is not stopping amid the clashes and the artillery bombing that is launched on the rebellious towns and villages, especially lately as the displacement of citizens in Turkey increased. The reason for the displacement of citizens is one, and it is the regime that is burning and destroying its own country for the throne, that the general public wants out as soon as possible.
Sources close to the Algerian diplomat Lakhdar Ibrahimi said he is still considering succeeding former envoy to Syria, Kofi Annan. Brahimi added that he wants a strong mandate from the Security Council and a clear commitment from member states to support UN mediation efforts in Syria to avoid a dead end, as was the case with Kofi Annan. Moreover, the pro-Assad regime newspaper Al-Akhbariyya Al-Libnaniya said that there are reservations about Al-Ibrahimi from the Syrian regime side, who considers him to be pro-opposition. Deputy Foreign Minister of Peru, Jose Byron Aranibar, said that the situation in Syria will be on the agenda of the third summit of heads of state and governments of South America and Arab countries, which will be held on the 1st and 2nd of October in Lima. Aranibar said during a press conference that the summit will certainly discuss the situation in Syria, and said that the participants in the summit will try to develop the option of peace and negotiations. The minister explained that 12 countries from the Arab League will participate, particularly the Moroccan monarch, King Mohammed VI, President of Lebanon, Michel Suleiman, President of Kuwait, Sheikh Jaber Mubarak al-Sabah, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, and the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani. In a statement issued by Mohammed Hassan Al-Amin and Hani Fahs, who are considered big names within the Shiite community in Lebanon, saying that they support the Syrian revolution of freedom and dignity. The statement said, "In embodiment of our known tendency to object to wrongdoing, no matter who is perpetrator, and in honor of our continuous support throughout the history to those who resist the Zionist occupation of Palestine and Lebanon, we call on our people to be in harmony with themselves in support of the Arab uprisings and trust them, and especially the Syrian uprising, which, God willing, is going to be victorious. And we call on our people to continue in the strive for freedom and not to pay attention to suspicious calls to give up in order to reach a settlement that is unfair for the Syrian people and their militants and martyrs, in line with what is befitting our historical status and what is befitting the courageous Syrian people until this atrocity is ended." Heavy clashes occurred between the Syrian and the Jordanian forces on borders between the two countries. This occurred as displaced citizens were trying to run away and find shelter in Jordan.
Heavy clashes were renewed between the Syrian and the Jordanian army on the border between the two countries in the area of Tal Shab, which is only 80 kilometers away from Jordan's capital, Amman. This event occurred as displaced citizens were trying to escape the regime's brutality from Syria and go to Jordan. The Syrian regime fired at the borders, which was followed by clashes. This is what a Jordanian source said to Reuters, while a Syrian activist confirmed that he saw military vehicles that were involved in the clashes. These clashes weren't the first of their kind, when in fact they occurred on many occasions during this month, where whenever the regime forces open fire, Jordan's army retaliates with the same to secure the way for the refugees. The clashes on the borders are increasing with the increasing number of citizens that are running away from the regime's brutality. The readiness of Jordan on the borders with Syria implies that the clashes are indeed increasing, especially after the Prime Minister of Jordan, Fayez al-Tarauni, said that Jordan reached a level where all options are available to protect the northern part of the country. The Syrian-Jordanian border is undergoing a very crucial stage, especially after the number of Syrian refugees that went to Jordan reached 130,000, 35,000 of which were recorded by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees.
And before we wrap up, here's another look at today's top stories. 85 were killed in Syria today, and the regime bombs Homs and commits another massacre in Al-Khalidiyya.
بعد أن تعرض الحي لقصف الطائرات من قبل عصابات الأسد.
حمص حي الخالدية.
Clinton is in Turkey and talks about the post-Assad period, and Al-Akhdar al-Ibrahimi is considering to succeed former envoy Kofi Annan. And 150,000 Syrian refugees are recorded with UNHCR and 54,000 are in Turkey. With this, we end our news bulletin from Orient TV. For more updates about the Syrian revolution, please visit our Facebook page. Thank you for watching.